Hey YouTube, this is PrimetimePokemon. In this video, I'll be reviewing my Empoleon deck. Now this is another competitive TCG deck review video that I'm doing for the 2018 Standard Format. If you'd like to view the other videos I've done in this series, in the description of this video, I'll provide a link to the playlist that I've created for these deck review videos. So this video will be laid out the same as my other deck reviews. The beginning of this video will give a general strategy for this deck. The middle part of the video will be showing the deck checklist. Also in the description of this video, I'll provide a deck checklist. And then a majority of this video, I'll be going through each and every card in this deck, stating why the card is in the deck, and then how I use that card. First off, it is important to remember that you can purchase the Imperial Command theme deck that is based around Empoleon from Ultra Prism, so that can get you on the right track to morph it into this deck. Now when it comes to general strategy for this deck, you want to get Empoleon into the active Pokemon spot and be able to use its move, Total Command, every single turn. You want to make sure you have a full bench and then try and get your opponent to put as many Pokemon as possible on their bench so you can do 200 plus damage every single turn for only 2 energy. Now something a little bit different in this deck is I use Captivating Pokepuff, that is a trainer from the Steam Siege set. This way I can force my opponent to put their basic Pokemon from their hand onto their bench, therefore making Empoleon do more damage every single turn. So again, the strategy here is to do major damage every single turn with Empoleon, and then you can also set up 2 Octillery on your bench to help draw cards into your hand and get exactly what you need to attack or set up your Pokemon each and every turn. Now I also use 2 copies of Alolan Ninetales, 1 GX and then the 1 rare from the Burning Shadows set. Of course, you can use the Burning Shadows Alolan Ninetales to prevent GX or EX cards from attacking it, and then the Alolan Ninetales if for some reason Empoleon is too difficult to set up or it gets knocked out, you can do some major damage with Alolan Ninetales GX. You just have to discard energy when attacking, but with Aqua Patch, you can get those water energy cards right back. So for the most part, this is a budget-friendly deck and a pretty straightforward deck when it comes to strategy. Just make sure you have a full bench and then try and attack with Empoleon every single turn. Now if you are facing a GX that has something more than 230 for its HP, you can use Whirlpool on Empoleon first, discard an energy from that defending Pokemon to perhaps prevent them from attacking during their next turn, and then use Total Command to knock out that Pokemon during your next turn. So I can show the deck checklist now on the screen. As you can see, 19 Pokemon in the deck. I use Remoraid on Octillery solely for drawing cards, and then I use a 2-2 line of Alolan Vulpix and Alolan Ninetales. I use one of each Alolan Ninetales just in case one of those is in my prize cards. And then of course I have less Piplup in the Empoleon line just because I want to use Rare Candy to skip over Piplup and evolve Piplup into Empoleon quicker. 31 total trainer cards in this deck. Again, the one caveat in the deck is Captivating Pokepuff. You could definitely increase the amount of that trainer card, and if you're facing a deck that has Tapu Lele in it, 2 to 4 copies, a lot of times you can use N, get Captivating Pokepuff in your hand, use it, and then when you put down Tapu Lele from your opponent's hand to their bench, not only does it omit the ability on Tapu Lele, but more than likely your opponent really didn't want to have Tapu Lele GX on their bench. And then I do use 10 total energy, 8 basic water, and 2 splash energy. Of course, splash energy, when a Pokemon is knocked out with a splash energy attached, you can return all the Pokemon in that line to your hand. So that's useful if you have Piplup on your bench, for example. Empoleon gets knocked out, you can move Empoleon back to your hand and immediately evolve Piplup into Empoleon. So I can get into showing the cards now. I'll take a look at the Pokemon first. Like I mentioned, 19 total Pokemon. The first line would be a 4-2-3 line of Piplup, Piplup, and Empoleon. All these cards are from the Ultra Prism set. So here's a look at the Piplup that I use in this deck. 4 copies of this card. I use this Piplup because it has a HP of 70 instead of 60. The other Piplup in Ultra Prism does do more damage for only 1 energy card, but for the most part, I really never want to attack with Piplup. Plus, if it is on the bench and you're facing something like a Buzzwole GX, it would take 3 turns instead of 2 to knock out Piplup. And then Prinplup. I use 2 copies of this card. Again, I'm trying to skip over Prinplup using Rare Candy. A solid HP on the card of 90. It has a 2 colorless energy retreat cost, which is a little bit high. And then it does have 2 moves. Bubble Beam, which does 20 damage for 1 water energy. And it paralyzes the defending Pokemon if you get a heads when flipping a coin. And then Wave Splash does 40 damage for 2 energy. Now, I've probably battled with this deck about 50 times on the online game. I don't think I've ever used Prinplup in the active Pokemon spot to attack. And then, of course, Empoleon is the featured Pokemon in this deck. 160 HP, which is average, I would say, for a Stage 2. But the advantage in this deck is that the main Pokemon, Empoleon here, only gives your opponent 1 prize card when they knock it out, as opposed to 2. And a lot of GX cards out there discard energy after attacking. So you only can discard so many energy before you run out of energy. And when you have to knock out 6 Pokemon instead of 3 to win the game, it gives this deck a big advantage. And this card does have 2 very good moves on it, Total Command and Whirlpool. Total Command for 2 energy does 20 damage for each bench Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. So it can do 200 damage if both players have a full bench. Of course, add a choice band to this, and it can do 230 damage per turn, which knocks out a lot of Pokemon in 1 turn. And then Whirlpool for 3 energy cards does 90 damage, and it allows you to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So like I mentioned, if you can't knock out the defending Pokemon with Total Command, I go ahead and use Whirlpool instead to hopefully prevent them from attacking their very next turn. So again, 4 copies of Piplup, 2 copies of Prinplup, and 3 copies of Empoleon. Next up here would be the Alolan Vulpix, Alolan Ninetales line. I use 2 Alolan Vulpix. This is from the Guardians Rising set. The main reason I use this specific Alolan Vulpix is for its Beacon move. For no energy at all, it says, search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. So I actually try and start the game with Alolan Vulpix in the active Pokemon spot. Then I use Beacon for no energy at all, meaning I can attach an energy to Piplup, for example. And then if I have a rare candy in my hand, I can go and get Empoleon and maybe Octillery, and then I can evolve those 2 Pokemon the very next turn, potentially able to use Total Command my second turn of the game, and then get Octillery on the bench, allowing me to draw cards into my hand just the second turn. So if you get Alolan Vulpix into the active Pokemon spot to start the game, and your opponent does not use N, it gives you a very quick start to the game. And then I use 1 copy of Alolan Ninetales GX and 1 copy of Alolan Ninetales. This one is from the Guardians Rising set. It does have a high HP and 3 moves. Ice Blade for 2 colorless energy does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Blizzard Edge does 160 damage for 3 energy cards. However, you must discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. And then Ice Path GX allows you to move all damage counters from this Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. So you may be able to get 4 energy on Alolan Ninetales GX. Use Blizzard Edge once. Hopefully your opponent has a powerful Pokemon set up that can't do 210 damage. So they attack you and do potentially something like 180 damage. Then you use Ice Path GX the second turn and knock that Pokemon out. Now this is weak to Metal type Pokemon. The Empoleon line was weak to Lightning type Pokemon. Now there are not that many good Lightning type Pokemon out there outside of something like Tapu Koko GX. So being weak to Lightning type Pokemon is a big advantage. The problem here with Alolan Ninetales GX, Duskmane Necrozma, very popular. Same goes for Dialga GX. But this is a powerful card here, like I said. If Empoleon gets knocked out a couple of times, or if you just can't get it set up on your bench, this may be a good option. And then if you are facing a deck that has a lot of GX cards or EX cards, you can evolve Alolan Vulpix into this Alolan Ninetales. I use one copy of this card from Burning Shadows. It has a solid HP of 110, a low retreat cost, and then the main reason I use this card is for its Luminous Barrier ability. It prevents all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX. So unless your opponent has Guzma in their hand, they cannot do any damage to Alolan Ninetales. So sometimes I may even put this card in the active Pokemon spot, not even attaching any energy to it, just so it'll give me more time to set up my Pokemon, and then Alolan Ninetales won't take any damage. So Empoleon is the main attacker in the deck, and then I'll more than likely try and attack with Alolan Ninetales GX. Not too often with Alolan Ninetales unless I can get several Aqua Patch in my hand and use those to get water energy from my discard pile to Alolan Ninetales on the bench. Next up here, I do use 2 copies of Remoraid and 2 copies of Octillery. Remoraid is from the Breakthrough set, 60 HP. This is a card I never want to get in the active Pokemon spot as well. 2 moves on the card. Wild River allows you to switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, and then Water Gun for 2 energy cards does 20 damage. I'd rather just attach an energy to Remoraid and retreat it, or attach a Float Stone to retreat it. And then Octillery, I use 2 copies of. I use a 2-2 line mainly because I do not want Octillery in the prize cards. Not being able to use Abyssal Hand really limits this deck. Abyssal Hand, like I mentioned, is the reason to use this card in the deck. This is from the Breakthrough set. The ability says once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. So I wanted to get at least one of these set up on my bench. You can use Bridget to put Remoraid on the bench, or you can use Brooklet Hill. And this is a card I really don't want to attack with either, just using its ability. And then I only use 2 copies of Tapu Lele GX. I only use 2 copies of this card, which is from Guardians Rising, because I can get 2 copies of Octillery set up on my bench to help draw cards, and then Empoleon really doesn't require that many energy cards to attack. Now, the main reason to use Tapu Lele GX is for its Wonder Tag ability. It allows you to search your deck for a supporter card and put it into your hand. And then Energy Drive does do 20 damage for each energy card attached to both active Pokemon. It also has no weakness and a low retreat cost, which makes it useful to use Guzma and then retreat it. So there's a look at the Pokemon in the deck, 19 total Pokemon. I can move on to the trainer cards next. So there are 31 total trainer cards in this deck, 12 supporters. I use 4 copies of Cynthia. This is from the Ultra Prism set. This just lets you shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 6 cards. This is very useful because it does not discard any cards and also does not affect your opponent's hand. And then I use 2 copies of all of the remaining supporter cards. Bridget here is from the Breakthrough set. It allows you to search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon or 1 Pokemon EX and put them onto your bench. So to start the game, I always want to have a Alolan Vulpix in the active Pokemon spot, so I go and get that if I don't have it currently. And then I go and get at least 1 Piplup and at least 1 Remoraid. And again, I can combine this with Brooklet Hill, and you can get 4 cards you want onto your bench the very first turn. Next up here would be Guzma, 2 copies of this card. This is from the Burning Shadows set. It allows you to switch your opponent's active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon, and then you also have to do the same. The advantage here is that you get to manipulate your opponent's active Pokemon. So you can attach a Float Stone to Octillery, for example, Guzma that into the active Pokemon spot, and retreat it for Empoleon, putting Empoleon into the active Pokemon spot, and more than likely knocking out whatever Pokemon you just put in your opponent's active Pokemon spot that same turn. And then I use 2 copies of N. This is from the Fates Glide set. It's similar to Cynthia, but this one affects your opponent's hand as well. Each player shuffles his or her hand into their deck and then draws the number of cards equal to the prize cards they have remaining. So if your opponent is winning the game and they only have 1 or 2 prize cards left, this card could be a lifesaver and a game saver and limiting what your opponent can do. Of course, early in the game, this will give you 6 cards. And I like to use this in combination with Captivating Pokepuff. If you're lucky enough to use N and Captivating Pokepuff, your opponent will have a full hand. And when you use that trainer, more than likely you'll be able to choose which basic Pokemon you want your opponent to put down. And then I use 2 copies of Professor Sycamore. Normally, you do not want to discard any cards from your hand. But since I use Aqua Patch in this deck, you can discard Water Energy and then get those Water Energy on your Water-type Pokemon on your bench. Next up would be the Item, Tool, and Stadium cards. I use 19 total. First up would be Ultra Ball. Several different sets include Ultra Ball. 4 copies of this card. It says to discard 2 cards from your hand and then search your deck for any Pokemon. So I use this to start the game to go and get Tapu Lele, and then use Tapu Lele to get Bridget. And then of course this is useful for getting things like Alolan Ninetales, Piplup, Empoleon, Octillery, any evolution Pokemon you want to go and get. Aqua Patch is next. I use 3 copies of this card. This is from the Guardians Rising set. It says, attach a Water Energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Now Alolan Ninetales is a little bit slower to set up, so this is useful in speeding the process up there. And then if a Pokemon is knocked out and Empoleon, for example, is on your bench with no energy cards, you can put a different Pokemon in the active Pokemon spot. Hopefully it has a Float Stone on it. Use Aqua Patch once, and then attach a Water Energy from your hand Empoleon, and then it's ready to attack. And then I use 3 copies of Rare Candy. Again, you want to skip over Piplup in the Empoleon line, just so you can get from Piplup to Empoleon in 1 turn, much quicker that way. And of course, Empoleon, the featured Pokemon here. So 3 copies of this card. Then I use 2 copies of Brooklet Hill. This is a Stadium card. This serves 2 purposes. Number 1, I do not use any Field Blowers in this deck. And then number 2, if the opponent puts out something like a Parallel City, limiting the number of bench Pokemon I can have, Brooklet Hill then discards that Stadium card when I put it down. It says once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic Water or basic Fighting type Pokemon, put it onto their bench, and shuffle their deck. So I go ahead and use Bridget and then this card to get 4 Pokemon I want onto my bench the very first turn. This is from the Guardians Rising set. And then I use 2 copies of Captivating Pokepuff. You certainly could use more. This is from the Steam Siege set. It says, your opponent reveals his or her hand. Put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench. So this not only reveals your opponent's hand to you, but also you can choose which basic Pokemon they can put onto their bench. And it also prevents those Pokemon from using their abilities they normally get when they move a Pokemon from their hand to their bench. So something like Tapu Lele, if you just go ahead and put it on their bench without your opponent wanting to put it on their bench, it cannot use its ability. So that is a very interesting trainer card and a very good card to use in this deck. Choice Band is next. I use 2 Choice Band. You attach this as a tool card to a Pokemon, and it does 30 more damage to Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX. So again, if both players have a full bench and you attach Choice Band to Empoleon, it can do 230 damage per turn. That means it can knock out something like Gardevoir GX in 1 turn. Of course, Fire-type decks are popular with Ho-Oh GX, Turtonator GX, and Volcanion EX, so this deck can already do twice the amount of damage against that deck. And then I use 2 copies of Floatstone. Choice Band is from Guardians Rising. This card, the newest set to include Floatstone, would be Breakthrough. You attach this as a tool card to a Pokemon, and it has a free retreat cost. So I try and attach this to Octillery a lot of times, sometimes Alolan Ninetales. That way I can use Guzma, put that card into the active Pokemon spot, and retreat it for free. Also, if you put a Pokemon that has a free retreat cost in the active Pokemon spot, you can then hopefully use Aqua Patch on something like Empoleon while it's on the bench, then move it to the active Pokemon spot, retreating your active Pokemon for free with Floatstone. And then the final trainer card here would be Rescue Stretcher. This is from the Guardians Rising set. 1 Rescue Stretcher in this deck. You can either put 1 card from your discard pile into your hand, 1 Pokemon, or you can shuffle 3 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. Now, if you can't get a splash energy on something like Empoleon and it is knocked out, you can use Rescue Stretcher to get all of those Pokemon back into your deck. Finally, I used 10 total energy cards in the deck. I used 2 splash energy and 8 basic water energy. I use more basic water energy just because Aqua Patch can only use basic water energy, and then you do see a lot of decks with enhanced hammer out there, so it would discard splash energy. But splash energy is very useful. It's from the Breakpoint set. If a Pokemon is knocked out while a splash energy is attached to it, that Pokemon and all previous evolution forms go back into your hand. But 10 total energy cards, which shouldn't be a problem here because Empoleon, for the most part, can attack for only 2 energy. So there is a look at my Empoleon deck. It is paired with Alolan Ninetales. And overall, this deck is very good. Like I said, it is a big advantage just because almost all the Pokemon in this deck are non-GX or EX. So your opponent is going to have to knock out 6 cards instead of only 3. And of course, Empoleon can do 200 damage per turn, so you're looking at doing major damage every single turn. It just takes a bit to get Empoleon set up if you can't get rare candy into your hand. But again, if you're looking for a somewhat budget-friendly deck, definitely give this deck a try. It is very fun manipulating your opponent's hand and their bench with Captivating Pokepuff, and then doing major damage every single turn with Empoleon. So there you have it. Thanks again everyone for watching. As always, before you go, check out all the links in the description of this video, including links to my blog, Facebook, and Twitter pages. And again, if you have any deck suggestion videos for me to do in the future, please let me know. And of course, I'll be doing a lot of deck reviews for cards from the Forbidden Light set. So there you have it. Thanks everyone for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.